Welcome to the 15th edition of the Jaipur Literature Festival, protected by Dettol, Banega Swasth India, at Jan Michalski Foundation, Beta. The festival brochure and flyer with details of the full program are available at purchase at the information desk. We are delighted to introduce Curtains Up, A Life in Theatre. This session is presented by Red FM India. Dazzling theatre personality, Dolly Thakore's autobiography breaks all barriers and vividly describes her life with searing honesty. Co-written with Arghya Lahiri, who carries 20 years of theatre experience, regrets none is humorous, witty and candid, as it discusses the glitz and glamour of her eventful life. Thakore traverses continents and encounters a motley assortment of people from all walks of life. Feminist publisher and author Ritu Menon's biography of the remarkable actor and dancer Zohra Sehgal, who lived a full life until the age of 90. Zohra, a biography in 4 acts, is uniquely structured in theatrical style. Menon puts into context how the creativity of dancer Uday Shankar and actor Prithviraj Kapoor impacted Sehgal. In conversation with Sanjoy K, Thakore, Menon and Lahiri discuss the essence of theatre, its genius, its magic, and its pervading misogyny. I would like to introduce the panelists. Dolly Thakore is a veteran actor, newscaster, columnist, and casting director who has worked in advertising, communications, and PR. She is also a staunch social activist, particularly for children and destitute women and for citizens for peace. Ritu Menon is a feminist publisher and writer who has been active in the women's movement in India and South Asia for almost 3 decades. Arghya Lahiri is a writer, theatre director, lighting designer, and filmmaker. He has worked in the theatre circle in every capacity he could have laid his hands on for over 20 years. Regrets None is his second book. Sanjoy Roy, an entrepreneur of the arts, is the managing director of Teamwork Arts, producers of the Jaipur Literature Festival and JLF and 25 other festivals across the world, and is a founder trustee of Salam Balak Trust. I request Sanjoy Roy to take over the session.
Thank you, Deba. And welcome to our new wonderful undergroundy artsy venue, which is the Jan Michalski venue for the arts, and of course it's called Betak. I have these wonderful people. When these 2 books arrived at my table, Zora, who used to call me Jesus Christ for whatever reason, and Dolly, who I've known forever, and Arghya, who's been engaged with us in Meta, our Mahindra Excellence of Theatre Awards. It was delightful to be able to read the stories of these 2 amazing characters. And as Arghya and I were discussing a little while ago, there was so much of cross-connection, their journeys through London, their meetings in different homes, and that's something that we wanted to explore. I'm going to start with Ritu. Zora's no more with us. Zora Appa, I think, passed away when she was 102. And let me tell you, certainly till her 100th birthday, she was as feisty as you could find anybody. She didn't take any nonsense. And I think it was on her 97th or 98th or 99th birthday, I can't remember, we had her at the Meta Awards as a lifetime celebration, and she sang, what did she sing? Abhi to main jawan hu. So amazing. I just loved everything about her. Ritu, what made you sort of pick up on Zora and her story?
They're on, okay. Well, you know, Sanjoy, as you said, she's an extraordinary woman, and I had known her for about maybe 10 or 15 years. And each time we met, she succeeded in surprising me yet again. I remember one time I went to see her. She was in the hospital. She had sort of slightly unwell. Kiran, her daughter, was in Bombay, and she called me from there and she said, Ritu, zara ammi ke yahan zara jaake dekh lena, wo theek to hain. So I said, fine, I'll go and see her. I went to the hospital, and a small clinic, and I knocked on the door, and she said, Kaun? So I said my name, and she said, Abhi nahi. I thought, she's really not feeling too well. So I waited for about 5 minutes, and then her attendant opened the door, and I went in. And there she was, sitting regally on the bed, propped up, about 6 pillows behind her, perfectly made up, coiffed, and perfectly dressed. So I said, Zohra, aap theek to hain? She said, हाँ, क्यों नहीं? I said, तो फिर आपने मुझे रुकने के लिए क्यों बोला? She said, अरे सूट तो पहनती ठीक ठाक, कोई मिलने आया है भाई, शक्ल तो संभालूं अपनी. So I thought, this is not something I expected at all. However, the real reason that I thought her story and her life were worth telling is because, she lived to be 102. She died in 2014. And she spanned a whole century of the performing arts in India. Now, there are very few people whom you can say that about. But what is even more remarkable is that she is the only woman who was in all the performing arts, except music. So dance, theater, film, television. And to be able to perform in all with the kind of panache and elan. I mean, Dolly will tell you, she has known her as well and seen her. I've never seen her dance. I've only ever seen her in film and on the stage. But I can tell you that she was an out-and-out professional. One of the things she said to me when she came back to India from England, and Dolly will probably bear me out as well, she said, you know what I miss when she started acting in films in Bombay? She said, what I miss is the professionalism. She said, यहाँ तो कोई तैयारी नहीं करता है. वो John Abraham जो है वो मेरे कान में आके फुस करता है. अरे, how am I supposed to emote? You have to say something. अपनी lines याद करो भाई. Lines पढ़ के आओ. She read her script any number of times before she opened her mouth. So it struck me that there was something about this woman, this performer, this aristocrat who needn't have done anything in her life, to have lived the kind of life she did, made the choices that she made, struggled with adversity, struggled with tragedy, and come out on top.
The other name for the book could probably have been Zora and her travels. She traveled the world. She drove around the world. She traveled the world. And it's amazing in the way that from London, where she packed her bags and came back to Almora, how her life was sort of so full of it, especially in Almora when they finally landed up there with the Uday Shankar company. It was a web of activity. And certainly it's a page turner because there's a gossip in every sentence in terms of who slept with whom at which point of time. Tell us a little bit about that time in her life.
Afterwards, I asked her, I said, because honestly speaking, I do believe this, and she also said it in so many words. She was madly and deeply in love with Uday Shankar.
As were about 3,000 other students, male and female.
So, and of course, he, as Sanjoy has said very plainly, he had no holds barred with everybody, whoever was there. So I asked her once, I said, तो फिर जब उन्होंने आपसे कहा कि शादी कर लो तो आपने मना क्यों कर दिया? She said, अरे, he was sleeping with everybody. I didn't want that. भाई ठीक है. I'm quite conservative, you know. So I thought, okay, that's a good enough reason for anyone. But then she said, and anyway, she said, तब तक तो वो आमला भी आ चुकी थी. Everybody knew ये तो छोड़ेंगी नहीं उसको. That was Amla Shankar.
Amla Shankar. And the other fascinating thing was really her relationship with her sister. I don't know if any of you know Uzura Apa. She was supposed to have been the more beautiful, the better performer, the sort of star of the Uday Shankar company. We had the occasion in mid-80s or early 90s, I can't remember, for the first time putting together and hosting a production of Ek Thi Nani, starring both Uzura Apa and Zora at Habitat, full houses, absolutely standing ovation. But tell us a little bit about the relationship between Uzura and Zora.
I think one of the most painful moments in Zora's life was when Uzra decided that she and her husband, or rather her husband decided, husband's family decided that they would move to Pakistan in the early 50s. 1952, I think it was, or maybe 53. Because that kind of break with the sister with whom she shared everything was a very big blow to her, very big emotional blow to her. Mind you, she always, in public, she always sort of said, she's the beauty and I'm the beast, she's the angel and I'm the devil. And then she would always make a joke about how a guard at Carnegie Hall, when they were performing there in New York, asked for one Sehgal, and the guard said, which one do you mean, the one with the big eyes or the big hips? And, you know, she would keep making cracks like this as though to suggest that there was this deep rivalry between them. Not a bit of it. People keep asking me, and so I asked Kiran. I said, well, everyone knows about Prithviraj Kapoor and Uzra Bhatt, and everyone knows that Uzra was the love of his life, and he never got over her till the day he died. But people have also suggested that Zohra was one of his lady loves. And she said, bilkul nahi. And I have to say that I never ever thought that that could have been the case. So I said to Kiran, I said, but koi to hoga. I mean, there's no smoke without a fire. She said, and this is not in the book, she said, Dekho, if there was anyone, I think, and I think I'm right, she said, it was Shami Kapoor.
Wow, beautiful, beautiful. A book that you all must pick up and have it signed. Dolly Thakore. Again, if it was The Travels with Zora, her book, Regrets None, is again such a journey from when she was a child and she moved schools and her first love, which was a fascinating story. Dolly, tell us about your early childhood.
Oh, before I dwell into that, must continue with Zora Apa. I was very lucky that I knew her in London, and the first person I met when I went for a rehearsal was at Zora's house in Belsize Park. And then, of course, we had lots of rehearsals together, lots of TV things together. Many years later, when I returned to Mumbai, it was her birthday, and I had invited her to my place, and I invited all the people from the Prithvi Theatre, from the Prithviraj group that she worked in. And as it happened, Uzra Apa was there also. So it was wonderful to have both the sisters there. Now, my house is the size of this stage, my full house. And so they all came, jam-packed in it, and Zora Apa recited, Abhi to main jawan hoon. And my little son, this was before he and Arghya became best friends, because Kwasar was only 7 or 8 years old at the time, and Kwasar played the lighting expert. So he held the lamp, and Zora Apa was performing in the balcony. I had a balcony attached. But you know, I mean, I have such lovely, endearing memories with Apa. And I was there for her 100th birthday at the Habitat, I think it was. And she's somebody that one can never forget, never forget. All right, now about myself. Tell me what you want to know.
Your early life, it was so fascinating. This is a whole world ago. And you went from place to place, you were being transferred, your family was transferred, and of course your first love, which was, again, a fascinating telling of the story.
My father was in the Air Force, But in those days, the Air Force wasn't what it is today, where you can fly out almost anywhere and things. So I've traveled Hyderabad, Kohat, Kanpur, everywhere, Delhi, with my father. What was lovely about the life that I led is we never worried about who wore what, who talked what language, who ate what, who prayed in whichever way they did. And I can't tell you how much confidence that gave you. It was wonderful. My heart weeps and breaks at what is happening to my country now. It was so wonderful to be like that. We never bothered of what perfume you put on, what long car you drove in, which house you lived in. You know, it was such an equalizer. And I'm so glad that I was a part of that India. And that is the life that I had led. And again, the education that we were taught was we had moral science, but it was really moral. It wasn't about which god you knelt to or which person which house you went to or which temple you went to or which mosque you went to. I mean, moral science was a subject that was taught in school. We were also taught current affairs, which is something that I keep telling all the schools where I'm invited to be chief guest or whatever. We used to have a topic called current topics every Saturday morning for 45 minutes. And we had to bring in a cutting from a newspaper. It could be as silly as a cat caught up in a roof or on a treetop or something. But, those are the kind of values that one imbibed. I have never been scared of being wrong about anything or doing wrong or being accused of anything. And I think that's what's given me the courage to be who I am. And this is the message that I would like to pass on to everybody else. I don't know what else you want to know, but here you are.
Dolly, one of the most interesting things again in the book is that you belong to a different time, and yet you were able to break what could have possibly been shackles to be able to embark onto this incredible journey, which is your public life. And your public life in those days, I mean, as a woman, and you've had the good fortune of having met and been part of so many historical occasions. Was there a challenge as a woman, as a young person, as a girl?
I think I wasn't scared of anything. I was honest with myself and therefore honest with people. I can't remember anybody pointing fingers and saying, "Hey, wo dekho kitni chalu hai," or "Dekho kaise dress hoti hai," "Dekho kaise chalti hai," which is what I hear a lot of people getting today. And none of that fazed me. I'm not saying that everybody applauded what I did, because my first experience in theater, which I have related and which is in my book, was at the age of 5. I was playing Krishna. I was painted blue and all that. The curtain opened. I took my first step and the sari fell off. And the curtain came down and all the Air Force wives rushed in to then tidy me up. And when the curtain opened, there was a huge applause from the audience. All Air Force wives and things. But that applause has rung in my ears always. I've always wanted an applause. And I hope that you all will applause after this. So I stepped into debates, elocution, inter-house, inter-college, inter-university, everything. I attended at Talkatora Gardens, at the international festivals that we used to have. I've sat next to Panditji, near his knee. Panditji, for me, Panditji, there's only one Panditji, and that's Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. He put his hands on my shoulder to get up. And I didn't wash that choli for 3 months. I mean, that is the kind of adoration, adulation, respect that one had for people at that time.
Arghya, what brought you to this wonderful story and the telling of it? And in many ways, you've captured not just her journey, but you've also you've given a vignette of so much of history. There's so many people she met, so many incidents that happened. How did that come about?
Well, it actually has its roots in one single story, but I'd just like to share with everybody what I said to Ritu just before this session started, is up until now, I've been describing her life as one that is epic in its sweep, and I still maintain that. But in contrast to Zohra Sehgal, it's nothing. Like, that is quite literally an insane span. The story was very simple, Sanjay. I was sitting doing lines with her. I've directed her 3 times, which is why I call her DT when we're working. You can't yell at somebody and say auntie. I've known her for a very long time. But she told me this story, which is in the book, about quitting smoking, how she quit smoking. And it's an exquisite little anecdote. So I'm very close friends with her son, and I said, you know, you should write a book, I said to her. Famous last words. Because she went, I've been writing one for 40 years. So I said to Kwasar, I said, listen, I'm being serious because I think some of these stories that she has, and the stories aren't the stories that you'd expect Dolly Thakore stories to be, the public figure, all of that. It's the little things, the childhood, the being a defense services kid, the first heartbreak, which to me is the biggest heartbreak, I think to her as well. And I said to Kwasar, I said, you know, if she needs some help, I'd be willing to, because I think the story should be out there. 3 days later, a suitcase arrived. But you know, full of transcripts, notes, 40,000 words of a manuscript, and clippings. And you know, here we are. That was one part of it. But the big thing for me, and I do think, so for me, her life traces a part of the history of Bombay, in particular, a part of the history of India in particular. Obviously, it's a very small part of it. But she's been through so many huge shifts. And what was personally very important to me, because she's been someone who I've known for a very long time. She went from being a friend's mum to being a mother figure of sorts. She's an actor I've worked with severally. She says I am her favorite director, but she doesn't say that publicly. So I've worked with her several times. She's a confidant. She's someone I lean on for a great deal of support. She's been there for very many strange points in my life. And to me, what was important was capturing her voice. And her voice, for people who know her, is markedly different from the voice that people think she has. I don't know if I've done it justice, but that was what the whole thing was.
You can, but just before you said that, Ritu, I wanted to check, Arghya, so what did you leave out?
Not a lot, actually. She's very clear. She wanted it all there. Because it's genuine, you know, this thing that I have no regrets. I don't hold anything back. I've shared anything. I was angry with people before. I no longer am, because how long are you going to hold on to a grudge? And this remarkable lack of fear. There was a point in time 3 years ago when I turned the dictaphone off and I said, look, I'm not recording anymore. You were 23 years old and you went to London on the strength of a handshake. Like, tell me
The promise
yeah.
of a possible
Yeah, if you come, I'll have a job for
you.
No visa, no passport. There's a line
She did have a piece of paper.
Yeah.
She did have
nothing,
a piece of
no
paper.
contract, just a conversation at a party. There's a line that we refer to constantly in the book. Well, not constantly, quite a lot. It's the kindness of strangers, which is Tennessee Williams, of course. But I said, you know, but 3 days later, because somebody else overheard the conversation, she had a passport, she had an entry permit, her sister worked for Air India, her mother said, I'll give you the money. And you know, 3 weeks later, you're standing on a pavement in London. And I said, surely you were afraid. Surely. No.
I'm going to come back to the heartbreak, because I think that's the sort of at the center, the kernel of the book. But Ritu, you were going to say something, and I'm going to ask you.
Of course, I haven't been able to put the book down, by the way, ever since I got it, which was 2 days ago. I still haven't finished it. And as I told you when we were chatting, there are so many familiar names and so many familiar passages and encounters and so on. But Arghya, what struck me, and I'm amazed at the fact that you have managed to get her voice. So how did you do it? How much did she write and how much did you intuit and write?
There was 40,000 words of a manuscript that stopped at about 1988 or 1990. And then things that we got in it's like a John Woo film. Things that we got in the manuscript, in the suitcase that arrived, somebody else had done about 5 hours of interviews with her. So there were transcripts of that. And then I did, much to my eternal regret, another 7 hours of interviews with her. So and a lot of it was not necessarily material that made it in the book, but just chatting. And I'm very cognizant of the fact that I am a young man who has co-authored a book with a woman, and it could be a very problematic thing. But I also feel like one of the reasons I was able to do it is because I've known her as long as I have in the capacities that I've had. I was her son's friend, then I became someone she worked with, then I became someone who worked with her quite strongly, independently, intensely, etc., etc. And we've been through a lot together, weirdly enough. So yeah, it's just, listening to it over and over and over again.
That could have been a problem, but I think you've done an absolutely extraordinary job because I know how difficult it is to get that tone, to get the pitch. And something that's astonishing in this book, and I want to say this because I'm also an editor. Those short sentences, very difficult to pull off if you don't get it absolutely right. And you have managed to do that.
Thank you very much. I'd also just like to say that the first job she ever had was as a copy editor. And receiving, and our great editorial team is here somewhere. Yes, hi, Swati, thank you for everything. But I just also want to say to get a manuscript back from DT after she's read it is very bruising for the soul and the ego. This is a lovely sentence. The next 3 pages are garbage. Thanks. I'll come and run more tape. So yeah.
But that shows, that shows that copy editors brutal sort of just junking of whatever is not necessary. So that's why I recognized. I said, is this Dolly's voice or Arghya's voice?
Ritu, coming back to your work, I mean, here was Zora, who's not with us anymore. And again, the research that went into it was amazing. The question that I have for you is that Zora performed all the time. She only wanted you to see her, as you said, when you walked in a particular space. And yet, in points, you have moved beyond that, beyond her persona. How were you able to break through that and tell the other story?
Sometimes I think that by the time I got to know her, she was already in her 90s, late 80s, 90s. I didn't, unlike Dolly, I never knew her when mind you, she was in her 50s when she reached London. Imagine, of course, Dolly's courage is amazing, but Zora arrived in London at the age of 50, no beauty, a single mother, no jobs, just, a few weeks in the British Drama League, and she decided she's going to make her way in British theatre. I mean, who was looking at an Asian woman? And a 50-year-old Asian woman who was not much to look at. As she said, I look like Ho Chi Minh. But I do think that by the time I got to know her, she had become her persona. It was actually not that easy to get to. I wish she had been alive when I was working on this, because I would have asked her some things that, of course, I never thought to ask earlier. For example, she said to me, Kameshwar is always very jealous of Uday Shankar. I said, wo kaise? She said, he said to me, दादा की सारी चिट्ठियाँ जला दो, मैंने जला दी. I said, what? She said, हाँ, कामेश्वर ने कहा जला दो, मैंने जला दी. Then she said, एक दिन मैं कमरे के अंदर गई in Bombay और कामेश्वर एल्बम खोल रहे थे. तो मैंने कहा, आप क्या कर रहे हैं? He said, सारी उदय शंकर की फ़ोटो सारी फाड़ के एक तरफ फेंक दी उन्होंने. Now, I wanted to ask her, actually, I would have asked her, look, how did you survive after he died? How did you actually live for another 52 years or more with that knowledge? And she always said to me, I have never been able to tell Pavan, her son, what really happened. Now, here is a woman who actually, I think, had a very, very, very private core that she allowed nobody to see. Now, someone, when they were reviewing this book, said that there is an absence in the book, and they're right. That absence is the Zora that no one was allowed to see. Maybe Uzura. But by the time I was doing the work, Uzura had passed away. There was no one I could ask. Other than her 2 children and her many colleagues and friends and people like Dolly and Kumar Sinha and many, many others, there was no intimate person I could speak to who was left. So it wasn't easy, Sanjoy.
Ritu, I'm going to come to you in a second. Ritu, tell us, heartbreak has been the center of both these books in different ways. Heartbreak, mental illness in this case, the sense of separation, the sense of not being able to live up to that image. Did you feel that Zora carried that sort of sense of loss or the sense of not being able to fulfill everything?
There was something that I found remarkable in Dolly's book, and I'm going to link it to Zora, which is you never say die. You never accept that you cannot overcome. And you never, as she said to me, Zora, when I asked her once, I said, "Aapne kaise zindagi is tarah se ladi without any?" She said, "I never look back and I have no regrets." Now, she had decided, come what may, I'm going to do what I have chosen to do. And I think she sublimated everything in her work. That's my only answer. If I had been able to talk to her and ask her what it meant and how she managed and so on, I might have arrived at another conclusion. But having talked to so many people and having actually tried to do whatever I could to uncover the times she lived in and the choices she made, I really do think that her work became her life. And it enabled her to deal with that kind of adversity. She said to me once, she said, I know I was a very bad mother to Pavan, the son, who was only 8 when his father died. But she said, "Main kya karti?" He needed a father figure. There was none. Well, what could I do? And she was terrified that he would take to drugs, which he did. Briefly, but he did. It tore her up. She just didn't know how to deal with. So I'm saying there were moments in her life where I'm sure she would have been utterly, despairing. But up and away.
Dolly, utterly despairing. There you were waiting in your house. You had bought this dream house, or you were promised a dream house, and there you were going to move in, and then it all fell apart. Despair, and you had to move to a much smaller place. You moved out of this.
It was the same place.
It was the same place.
No, but before we go into all that, I want to share something about Zora Appa. My son runs a festival called the Thespo Festival, where we acknowledge theatre greats, etc. And so Zora Appa was given the Lifetime Achievement Award, and we had a dinner at home. In fact, at Kwasar's house in Warsaw, those that know Andheri and Warsaw and Mumbai. And Zora is sitting there on that chair, and she's telling me, I'm trying to flirt with your father, and he's not even looking at me. And my father was also 92 years old, a widower, just a new widower at that time. And she says, I'm trying to flirt with him, and he's not even looking at me. So, but that's the spirit that Appa had. It was a never say die.
Well, that was the outward spirit that she had.
Absolutely.
Going
and
back, despair.
Okay. Now, what is the question? I've forgotten what you said.
It's about you had been promised this house, you guys had moved in.
Yeah, but that's okay. I mean, it's all now forgotten and gone. That was all 40 years ago. But it's not that I don't resent it, but I have no regrets about it anymore. I don't hold any grudges. And in fact, when he died, I was the one who was with him till the last minute. So that's life. Life goes on. You can't bear grudges and live your whole life just because something's gone wrong. And that was also it all started 40 years ago. 40 years ago is when he moved out of this house, which I thought was going to be my dream house. But it didn't work out that way. And so what? I mean, we still kept in touch. 10 years I didn't speak to him, but after that we were best friends. No, not best friends, but we were friends.
We're talking about Alex. So, advertising in that time, and you were very much part of the advertising set, the musical set, the theater set. Set the stage for us a little bit. What was it like?
Well, to tell you that I did a play called The Birthday Party by Harold Pinter, in which Alec directed me. And I was, I think, 28 years old then, but he directed me as a 26-year-old Lulu, wearing a strapless top and a backless and short little skirt and thing. 30 years later, Arghya Lahiri directed me in the same play. And I played Meg, the lady in charge of the guest house where these people all come. And I mean, that was a wonderful experience, from a 26-year-old sexy Lulu to playing Meg. And I must say he did a wonderful job, because I had a lot of compliments for that particular performance.
It would have been deeply problematic had she played the same character. Like my directorial career, not that it's great shakes, but
these days everything is possible with the Botox. Arghya, tell me, you talked about directing her, you talked about being, her being a support. Of course, Quasar is a great friend. How do you make the sort of leap between one and the other? And why did this book become a book and not a play?
Well, it's a book because she began it as a book. To respect what she wanted to do with it, I think, is the most important thing. Quasar said to me when he read one of the earlier drafts, he said, I find it very theatrical, because it's like she's speaking. So if somebody wants to take a shot at it, they are more than welcome. I will have nothing to do with it. I don't think I can. It's not, when you work with somebody who you've known outside of the theater, perhaps also the theater allows this, where you can sort of put on the hat of a director and take it off. It wasn't ever too problematic, I have to say. In fact, I enjoy working with her very much, and we've done some really excellent stuff together, in my opinion, at least. Like, she's always been wonderful, and she's able to find things, but you know that there are things that you have to do for her. Somebody has to go home and run lines with her. It's now par for course, because she can't remember it the way she used to be able to. That's fair. I'll do that because I know that what she will bring, if she feels secure enough, is that powerful.
Do we have time for questions, or it's a timeout? Two questions. Okay. Ritu, you were asking.
I was just asking, how long did it take you to write it, actually?
Well, it took DT 45 years, but we started 16. So, and it was out last year, but we must also take the pandemic into account. So it may be
3 years.
4 years. 4 would have been.
Any questions? No. Yeah.
Hi. So that's the fascinating difference here is really that what Ritu has written as a biography and what Arghya has written as an autobiography. Between Arghya and Ms. Thakore, is there anything of the core that you have not revealed, or have you completely pulled the rug out of any future biographer?
Sorry, can somebody just relay that question again? I couldn't hear you very well.
Is there anything that you held back?
No, I have to say, well, we can say it now.
Sorry,
there was a point where Quasar, her son, and I sat her down and went through a list of things saying, are you sure you want this in the book? And she said, yes. So there's been any censorship that has emerged from this process, and there has been some, has come from her on reflection. I will emphasize that very much. It's not, I went to bat for her. And I knew that part of my job was to be the battering ram, that I needed to make this possible for her, and then we would go with whatever she wanted to go with. So there are people who passed away or whatever, and she may wanted to not go in the direction of revealing certain things, but that's it. That came from her.
A second question? Yeah.
But we can hear you.
No, it's all going live.
Oh, sorry.
Hello? Yeah.
Ah,
yeah.
there we are.
So, Arghya, this is actually more for you.
Okay.
You have, my first comment is they don't make them like this anymore, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so you've been working with thespians.
Yes.
And younger people in theatre.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you, we talk so much about these mental health issues right now, okay? Now, Dolly, Zora, Appa, all of them had their own turmoil, but somehow it became larger than life. So there's so many thoughts right now, but did a life in theatre give them that confidence, that, that chutzpah to break through it, and will you recommend theatre as a cathartic, therapeutic tool for other young people to come into, build confidence, etc.?
If I may, I think we're conflating perhaps three different things.
There are many things, yeah.
I think greater understanding about things like mental health should always be an ongoing process.
Absolutely.
We know more now than we did last year, and hopefully next year we will know more than we did this year.
Yeah.
So I'm very reluctant to conflate the two.
Okay.
I will suggest that I think it's the other way around. I think that these two women were drawn to the theatre because they are who they are.
But did their experience enable them?
The
to be
theatre
way-
always
Yeah?
does, but it works differently for different people. It's not a cure for, it doesn't help you process things better. It maybe allows you to see the world with more colors, but it can be therapeutic, it is not therapy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay.
But I do think that they endured with the things they did because they are who they are. And you will notice that they're both actually they come from different kind of family backgrounds, but also very similar family backgrounds. Very secular, raised by people, in DT's case, actually her grandmother and aunt, who hammered into them, and in Zora's case, her father, that there is nothing to be afraid of. They grew up with an innate sense of fairness about the world, that what you put in is what you will get out. And they grew up in a better time where innocence was treasured instead of mocked. And I think those things made them who they are, and that is why they sustained in the theatre as long as they did, as opposed to the other way around. The theatre propped them up and turned them into these people. It enriched their lives, of course, as it does everybody's, but I think if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.